Hey guys, today I'm going to be talking about crosshair placement. What is crosshair placement? Crosshair placement is defined as the location of your crosshair at a given time. Why is this so important? The less you have to move your mouse to click someone in the head, the faster and more reliable it is, and this leads to winning more duels. Ideally, you want to have your crosshair placed so that you don't even need to move your mouse to click them in the head. And today I'm going to explain how to do this. Let's break it down. There are two variables to head clicking someone: your crosshair location and timing the click. So you need to have your crosshair at the right place and at the right time. With flicking, you need to control your crosshair location and your timing. With perfect crosshair placement, you only need to click at the right time since your crosshair is already at the right location. To achieve perfect crosshair placement, we want to minimize potential error in both variables. I'm going to cover some fundamentals before I go through the topics. Let's talk about variance. Variance is a measure of variability in a dataset. Let's compare mouse aiming versus keyboard aiming, for example. In this dataset, I will record which circle my bullet lands in with mouse aiming versus keyboard aiming. You can see that using your mouse to aim has more variance than using your keyboard to aim. What does this mean? This means flicking has more variance than already having your crosshair in the correct location. You might hit a sick flick every now and then, but it's more consistent if you don't need to move your mouse at all. That being said, there are some situations where you are forced to flick to multiple places at once, but this should be avoided whenever possible. The other fundamental I'm going to talk about is angle advantage. If two players are peeking each other around a corner, the one closer to the corner will be at a disadvantage, since the other one can see them first. Having a higher angle advantage lets you clear angles with more precision and control, meaning you don't expose yourself to a lot of potential peeks at once. This means you can predict how most people will peek an angle. Players will usually peek an angle as far back as possible, so that they have the maximum angle advantage. With that out of the way, let's break crosshair placement down even more. Your crosshair needs to be at the correct horizontal and vertical coordinates. Let's talk about horizontal coordinates first. The biggest mistake I see a lot of players making is holding an angle too tight. This means that their crosshair is too close to the corner, and by the time that they react, the opponent's head has already zoomed past the crosshair. It is possible to correct this with a flick, but like I said earlier, flicking introduces unnecessary potential error. You should be holding your crosshair where the head will be, with reaction time accounted for. So how wide do you hold an angle? There are three main factors to consider: the angle at which they approach you, how they peek you, and how far away they are. The first factor is the angle at which they approach you. At a given moment, a player's movement can be broken down into perpendicular and parallel vectors from your perspective. When a player is moving straight across the screen, they have maximum parallel velocity, which means they are moving at maximum speed from your perspective. With a 60-degree angle to the perpendicular, they have lost some parallel velocity and they now have some perpendicular velocity. Reducing this even further to a 30-degree angle to the perpendicular, there is much less parallel velocity. Notice how they are getting slower on your screen as this progresses. Now if they're moving straight towards you, there is no apparent movement from your perspective. What can we take away from this? If opponents are moving on your screen with a lot of parallel velocity, you need to hold wider. If there is less, you can hold tighter. This is very useful for calculating crosshair placement when holding off angles. It's worth noting that if they're moving with a lot of parallel velocity, there can be a lot of variance since they can stop at many different points. For example, if you're holding speedway from market, there isn't much parallel velocity when they cross the screen, so you can hold a tighter angle. However, if you're holding B main from stairs, they will peek you with maximum parallel velocity, which can be dangerous since there is a lot of variance for where they can stop. This brings us to the second variable. How do you know what kind of peek the opponents will do? There are three main peeks I will talk about: the wide swing, the normal swing, and the tight swing. I'm not going to talk about jump jiggle peeking since those are quite hard to hit. It can be quite hard to predict what the opponents will do since this does vary from elo to elo, but these are the general behaviors I've noticed. Wide swings can happen if they don't know you're there and they don't check you. This can happen if you're lurking and an opponent rotates without checking you. Wide swings can also happen after an opponent knows you're there, either from geo peeking or from other information. Sometimes in 1v5 situations, opponents will greed and bum rush you for a kill. In these situations, they will usually wide swing you. Needless to say, you need to hold wide for wide swings. Normal swings can happen if opponents are checking common spots or if they know you're there. Tight peeks are typically used for information or if they have an operator. Sometimes opponents will also rhythmically tight peek and fire bursts in your general direction. A lot of people don't realize this, but many people do this with a predictable rhythm. If you time the rhythm, it's possible to hold for a tight peek and pre-fire them. For example, the Jet misses an op shot on me. I hold for the tight re-peek, and since I know how fast the operator fires, I can anticipate the shot and pre-fire them. So these are the types of peeks that I look out for. It's extremely situational, and you'll need to think of all the factors that will affect the way that they peek. The third and final factor is the distance between you and them. This sounds obvious, but this greatly affects how tight you hold your crosshair, both vertically and horizontally. If they are further away from you, they move less on your screen and thus you can hold tighter. If they're closer to you, they move much faster on your screen and you'll need to hold wider. A case I want to bring up is holding B-Link from mid-ascent as a defender. You have to be quite careful since they can swing into mid, which counts as a close peek, or they can swing from far back. This is an example of high variance since the correct crosshair placement can vary a lot in this situation. In regards to holding smokes, you should be aiming at either side of the smoke. I see a lot of players holding the middle of the smoke. Don't do this. No right mana player will push out the middle since this exposes them to a lot of angles at the same time. This is dependent on the smoke location, but over time, you realize that players push out smokes in a predictable manner. With the horizontal component out of the way, let's talk about the vertical component of your crosshair placement. Regarding vertical crosshair placement in general, some players might have trouble figuring out where the head height is. There are clues on every map that will give you hints for headshot height. For example, radionite boxes or bricks and lines on the wall. I'm not going to list or go through all of these since there are so many, you'll just learn them as you play more. Whenever you peek an opponent who is on a different vertical height to you, you need to be very careful as there can be potential for a lot of vertical crosshair variants. For example, holding Heaven on Ascent from A site, the head can pop out anywhere from here to here, depending on whether they swing close to the wall or further away. Although there is some variance holding these angles, most opponents will swing from far back to get as much angle advantage as possible, and it might be worth holding for this if you have a teleport or dash to bail you out. For example, let's say you're holding Heaven on Bind from B showers. I'll hold my crosshair lower since they'll probably swing from the back. In regards to swinging angles, it helps immensely to visualize where they are, where the head will be, and position your crosshair before swinging, so that there is minimum mouse correction required. So that covers all of the crosshair placement bits. In regards to timing, you can record your gameplay and rewatch any duels that you lose. Analyze them and find out why you lost that duel. This goes for improving in general as well. A lot of people come into my chat and ask me how to improve. You need to be proactive, which means figure out what you're doing wrong and work on it. I do this all the time. If I lose a duel that I don't understand how I lost, I'll quickly pause my recording and watch it back to see what I did wrong. Regarding all this, using the Guardian is a great way to practice this. To accelerate your crosshair placement skill, going Guardian only can be very helpful. Using a Vandal or Phantom will give you leeway and can reward you for an error, whereas a Guardian will punish you for any errors and force you to fix them. So that's it for the crosshair placement guide. If you have any questions, leave them below and I'll try answering them in another video. Also, I'm always looking for new songs to use on my videos, so if you have any suggestions, feel free to leave them below or in my Discord song suggestion channel. Otherwise, thank you again so much for watching my videos and supporting my channel.